are battles fought with swords and shields, and battles fought in the secret places of the heart. One is won with strength, the other with steadfast obedience. Zur's story is about the battle that Israel lost, not on the battlefield, but in their hearts and desires. The land of Moab was a place of rolling hills and fertile plains, nestled just outside the borders of the Promised Land. Israel had camped there, ready to cross over and finally claim their inheritance. The people were tired but hopeful. The Promised Land was so close they could almost taste it. But while they rested in the plains of Moab, Zur, a Midianite prince, watched them from a distance. He saw the strength of Israel, their numbers like a sea stretching across the land. His people had heard the stories, how Israel's God had crushed mighty Egypt and delivered his people with plagues and parted seas. Zur knew there was no defeating Israel in battle. Still, Zur smiled to himself. If they cannot be defeated from without, he thought, then we will destroy them from within. Zur gathered the other leaders of Moab and Midian. War won't work, he said, his eyes gleaming with cunning. But we don't need swords to bring them down. We will use their own desires against them. The leaders leaned in as Zur explained his plan. They would send Midianite women into the camp of Israel, not as warriors but as seducers. These women would tempt the men into relationships, enticing them to forsake their God and join in the worship of Baal of Peor, a pagan god whose rituals were filled with immorality and depravity. The leaders nodded. It was a wicked plan, but a brilliant one. The seduction begins. The first Midianite women entered Israel's camp like shadows at dusk, silent, smiling, and alluring. They laughed at the men's jokes, whispered promises of secret pleasures, and invited them to feasts held in honor of Baal. What harm could it do? Some of the men thought. It started with a few, but soon dozens, then hundreds of Israelite men were caught in the trap. They attended the feasts. They ate the meat sacrificed to Baal. They bowed before the pagan altars. The boundaries between the holy and the profane blurred, and the once pure camp of Israel was defiled. And standing at the center of this plan, orchestrating it all, was Zur. His own daughter, Cosbi, was part of it. A princess among the Midianites, known for her beauty and charm. Zur sent her directly into the heart of Israel's leadership, confident that her influence would seal his victory. Zimri's bold rebellion. Among the Israelites, there was a man named Zimri, a leader of the tribe of Simeon. He wasn't content to hide his sin in the shadows. No, Zimri wanted everyone to see it. He took Cosbi by the hand and, in broad daylight, led her into his tent, right in front of the tabernacle of God. The people gasped. Some wept. Others turned away, too ashamed to speak. How could one of their leaders flaunt such open rebellion? But Zimri didn't care. He laughed at their shock. What's the worst that could happen? He thought. He believed he was untouchable. Phinehas' holy zeal. But there was one man who couldn't stand by and watch this defilement any longer. His name was Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron the high priest. His heart burned with righteous anger, not because he hated Zimri, but because he loved God's honor. Phinehas rose to his feet, his eyes blazing. He grabbed a spear and marched toward Zimri's tent. The camp fell silent, watching him pass. No one dared stop him. Without hesitation, Phinehas entered the tent. In one swift, decisive strike, he ended the lives of Zimri and Cosbi. The act was swift, brutal, and necessary. The plague that had been ravaging Israel suddenly stopped. God's judgment was satisfied, and peace returned to the camp. But not before 24,000 Israelites had died because of their sin. Zur's downfall. Word of what happened spread quickly. Zur's plan had failed. His daughter was dead. Israel was rising again, purging the sin from their camp, stronger and more determined than ever. And God wasn't done with Zur yet. He commanded Israel to take vengeance on the Midianites. In the battle that followed, Zur and the other Midianite leaders were hunted down and killed. His schemes, his ambitions, all of it crumbled to dust. The man who thought he could outwit God found himself on the wrong side of divine justice. The legacy of Zur. Zur's name is a warning, a reminder of how deadly compromise can be. He wasn't a warrior in the traditional sense, but his weapon was deceit and seduction. He thought he could destroy God's people through sin, but God's plans could not be stopped. His story leaves us with this challenge. What temptations are you letting into your camp? What compromises are you making that seem small now, but could lead to ruin later? So, when you think of Zur, don't just think of a Midianite prince. Think of a man whose cleverness turned to foolishness, whose ambition led to destruction, and whose rebellion against God sealed his fate forever.